you're at Lake Rant, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Armin Stein, who says, rant about Infinite Jest. If you haven't read enough of it to have formed a solid opinion on it yet, then rant about your favorite books. Well, Infinite Jest, I've read like 50 pages or so of, because, Ben Saint had it, I borrowed it from him, and I still have it. But, the thing about Infinite Jest is the first chapter is riveting. It is super well done, super interesting. It tells the story of this character who's, like, I think he's, like, being admitted into college, but he, like, can't or just doesn't speak. And there's this really interesting like back and forth surrounding him, and then I think he like collapses, if I remember correctly. I read this probably 2 years ago, in fact more than 2 years ago. But yeah, I remember being super intrigued by the opening chapter, and then from there the book kind of it just goes in different directions. Like as you read it, it just goes into different characters, different narrators, different situations, and it's very difficult to parse any kind of point to what is being said. And in fact, it is quite clear that a lot of details that it's going into are definitely pointless. There are parts where it's just going into tedious, extraneous, extreme detail, and also there's all these footnotes, except that they're not at the foot of the page. You have to actually go to the back of the book to read these additional bits that can get, quite lengthy. And in the experience I had getting about 50 pages in, not one of them was really worthwhile. Like, they're all, again, random, extraneous details that it's so difficult to parse, like, what you should try to retain versus what you shouldn't, or to even really be entertained by a lot of these details. It was just kind of a lot. I mean, the book is fucking massive, and I'm sure that it eventually gets to a point where you start to connect some of these dots, or some of this stuff starts to matter a bit more, or become more digestible on some level. But it was just kind of like, this is a lot, and it's not a lot in the sense of like, reading James Joyce, where or like Naked Lunch, where it's like difficult to even parse what you are reading, but when you do, you feel like, wow, this is written in a really interesting way. It's just like leaden with ridiculous, extraneous detail that you literally can't tell if there's any fucking point to it. So it's a weird one. I'm sure I'll give it another shot eventually, but my favorite book is House of Leaves, which I definitely think takes some Infinite Jest and many other things influences. It's a meta book that is basically several books inside of each other. It's about a guy who is kind of losing his mind as he tries to reconstruct a book by another guy who's writing a book that is an in-depth analysis about a video that is not real. And the video is about a house that this family lives in that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And documenting this house as it seems to continually grow. And it's basically a horror novel, but also mostly it's about the meta structure of the book. Again, rife with footnotes, except in this case they're really fun. And the book is structured as a labyrinth, and you have to constantly move the book around in order to read it. Pages are structured in unique and interesting ways. The author, Mark Z. Danielewski, his other work has been a lot less penetrable. Like, House of Leaves is already like a kind of intimidating book in terms of size and, being this cryptic maze. But, like, it is mostly a straightforwardly entertaining thriller that just happens to be presented in, like, the craziest way possible. His other work, Only Revolutions in particular, is completely unreadable. I have no fucking idea what the deal with that book is. He started up this big-ass other series that I haven't really started reading yet, but it's like kind of a middle ground. It's not as ridiculous as Only Revolutions, but it's also not as straightforward as House of Leaves. So, I'll probably give that a try at some point. I think it's called The Familiar. But yeah, so House of Leaves is my favorite book. I could sing the praises of it all day and night. Um, what else are my favorite books? I'm a huge Hunter S. Thompson fanboy. Jorge Luis Borges. I generally just like metafiction and stuff that, kind of comments on itself or the nature of the medium, or stuff that just like, has like really far flung ideas that are like not that literal. Um, I'm not the most well read individual, so I wouldn't say I have like a huge list of favorite books or anything like that. I also love Oscar Wilde. I love aphorisms, anything that just sounds cool when you say it. That would be one of my favorites as well. So, I tend to like writers who just say lots of cool shit in their writing, or otherwise are dense and meta. So yeah, I guess that's my favorite book.